Um, so, acting on anonymous tips, the RCMP arrested Shepard, arrested Savannah Rath at the airport, and as they were surrounding James Gamble's house, he killed himself in Cole Harbor. Of course, this is one of those stories that chilled a lot of people to the bone at that time. I remember at the time just sort of seeing, particularly in the North End, because there was, of course, always the stories about who these kids were and what they had done and what they had planned to do when the shooting had happened, or rather when the arrests had happened. I remember seeing in the North End here in Halifax a few signs that said, James Gamble is not deranged, he was sick. I don't, you know what, guys, pick your fucking spots, okay? Talking about mental health is an important thing, but Jesus Christ, man, pick your spots. This kid, yeah, he killed himself, and that's I'm sure a real tragedy for him and his family, and I'm sure it's a gaping hole that still exists, 3 years later. But here's the thing: he was planning on shooting up a mall and perpetrating what would have been the worst thing to happen in this city since the Halifax explosion. Oh, by the way, speaking of the Halifax explosion, I'm not going to get into this too deeply, but turns out Rob Lowe's bad at history. On Kimmel, there, I'm sure you might have seen the clip of Rob Lowe. He was supporting Super Troopers 2, and he made a few jokes about the Halifax explosion that were just not historically accurate. But anyhow, we're talking about a school shooting, and not school shooting, a mall shooting. So we're going to move past Rob Lowe being bad at history. So the reason that this has a weird resonance for me personally is now we're looking back at 2015. Valentine's Day, right? Which was a Saturday, and I happen to know this because at the time I was still working as a supervisor at my job, and the way that it sort of shook out that particular year is there were 6 supervisors on the team, 3 men, 3 women. And all of the guys were single, and all of the ladies were in long-term relationships. So I was supposed to be off that evening, as were the other 2 guys. So I said to one of the girls who was supposed to be working the late shift, 5:30 until 1:30. I said, you know what, I'll cover your shift. Don't worry about it. So I think she took my Monday, so I still got 2 days off in a row. It was my weekend off, but I worked her Saturday for her on Valentine's Day so that she could go off and have her Valentine's Day times. So I was getting ready for work that afternoon, and that's when I get a call from my buddy Omar, and he says to me, "Have you seen the news?" I said, "No. What happened?" He says, "Well, there was supposed to be this shooting, but they stopped it." I said, "Oh, that's great." He says, pull up a CBC News article. And I do, and of course they show the pictures of the perpetrators, and there's Randall Shepard, who up until the Monday before, so Monday the 9th, I guess, he worked about 10 feet away from where I sat on a regular basis. It was just like a profoundly strange thing. So Randall Shepard, I didn't really know him. I wasn't really close with him. I wasn't tight or anything like that. He was a quiet dude, kind of weird, kind of awkward, bummed smokes for me. I smoked pretty regularly at the time, and he would bum smokes for me on the regular. Of course, it's one of those things you wouldn't ever know. You would never expect to be sitting there next to somebody who harbored these dark fantasies. His sort of part in this whole thing, he's doing, I think, 10 years for conspiracy. He wasn't actually going to take part in the actual shooting itself. He was instead just sort of egging them on, and he was helping them plan it, but wasn't actually going to be involved in the actual actual shooting itself. I think he may have been making some of the Molotov cocktails or something like that, and then he was going to then kill himself. So just a really profoundly weird evening at work as a result. Of course, people were upset about having to work on Valentine's Day, and then on top of that, we had this weird air in the room of no one being quite sure what the hell was going on. There was apparently like no plan for them to make any move towards coming to my workplace afterwards, after the mall. There was no plans of that. But it's just weird. Like, he had literally just quit the Monday before, and then he was gonna go do something that would have been absolutely made him absolutely infamous. Just eerie. Savannah Rath, I've done a little bit of reading on her and on the type of person that she is and what she's about. Pretty weird as a person goes. I mean, I guess you have to be pretty weird in order to believe the things that she believed, but harbored some white supremacist type notions, while she herself had, I believe it was Thai roots. Found a blog, a travel blog, somebody, like a class trip that she had taken, and with a bunch of people, and it was like somebody in her class doing the blog and kind of complaining about her being a bit of a sourpuss the entire trip. It's just strange to sort of look back as like, these are these people, these are who they are, outside of their sort of dark corners of the web. Just really, really strange. And it could have been a much different outcome had there not been an anonymous tip. The RCMP was told of their Tumblr pages, which is where they sort of talked a little bit less cryptically about what they had planned to do. It wasn't like they were saying, okay, on Saturday, September. Wow. Saturday, February 14th at approximately 9 a.m. we're going to go into this. It wasn't anything like that, but it was, on Valentine's Day, it's going down. Man, just so crazy. So I guess she just recently, Savannah Rath just recently changed her plea. She was originally going to plea not guilty, but apparently what ended up happening was her Facebook conversations with Gamble were entered into evidence and were going to be allowed to be viewed as evidence, and that changed her mind. So she did plead guilty in the end. I don't think she's ever going to get parole. I just do not predict a situation where she's ever going to prove that she has been that her mind has been changed. You have to be pretty far warped to want to do what she wanted to do. So she'll be behind bars for quite some time. If she ever does get parole, she will almost certainly be extradited to the United States, deported rather, I should say, to the United States, and that'll be that. But I don't think that she's going to see much of the outside world ever again. So that's the story there. Very, very strange sort of set of circumstances that particular evening, and it's just, of course, with the sentencing coming down, is something that I always, keep a close eye on. But it just brought back those really weird memories. I ate a lot of Smarties that night. Heather, who had covered the shift of, she gave me a big box of Smarties for doing the job for her, and I ate most of them, just stress eating, and didn't do a lot of work that evening, which I think I can be forgiven for. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna talk about something that is a little bit less murdery, I think, once we come back from the break, but not completely unmurdery. We're gonna talk about the weird sort of set of circumstances surrounding old North Korea. Things are going okay? Question mark. After this. So here's a weird sentence. I kind of wish that I were in North Korea right now. going to let that one percolate for a second. Of course, I would have to learn how to speak Korean, I guess, but to be able to try and see what the state-run media in North Korea is doing right now, I think would be really, really fascinating, because it's looking more and more like what has been a particularly hostile North Korea is going to, deal with the United States in a significant way. Now, there's problems that are floating around. I mean, not least of which is, like, I kind of would rather literally anyone other than the current U.S. administration be the ones leading these talks with the North Koreans. I just do not trust an American presidency that is pretty hostile to globalism to be doing this sort of very light touch, very important diplomacy. But nonetheless, here we are. It's looking more and more like an actual legitimate meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald 45 Trump is going to happen. It's weird, right? Because, like, I don't want him to be successful as a leader, really, either of them. But by the same token, like, this is an incredibly important meeting. Now, I think that there was a bit of a misstep that Trump sent over a nominee for Secretary of State rather than an actual Secretary of State to do the preliminary talks. When I do not see Mike Pompeo becoming the permanent Secretary of State. I just don't think he's going to be able to be confirmed by the Senate. I don't see it happening. So I think that was maybe a little bit aggressive on behalf of the Trump team, but whatever. Obviously, I don't like the idea of such a significant win going in Trump's win column, but by the same token, like, we kind of need this to work as an international community. Like, an armed North Korea is one of the most dangerous things that you could possibly have, and a pissed off armed North Korea is even worse. So hopefully, if the meeting does indeed happen, there's some good outcomes. Of course, I don't think that we're kidding ourselves into thinking that there's going to be like a fantastic outcome to this. I think it's going to be more of the same, basically. If they promise to not develop their nukes for a few years, and as a result, we lift some of the sanctions. The Western country lift some of the sanctions. Some people get to actually eat in North Korea, which I'm sure will be nice, and then something happens, they piss off Japan, and everything gets frosty again. The other thing that is a little slightly problematic about this whole situation is Trump's handling of the Iran nuclear deal, and saying that he doesn't want to reauthorize Iran. Kind of makes it look like what benefit does the Kim regime actually have to deal with Trump and his team if they're just going to turn around and just not honor their commitments, even though these commitments were, of course, Obama era commitments. I just honestly, I just don't know. It's complicated. It's always been a complicated part of the world, and this is the weird, scary bit that we're sort of left dealing with, I guess, is what happens. And it's just very much two incredibly unpredictable leaders. And I don't know, it's uncomfortable for the rest of the world to not feel like there's an adult in the room. So I don't know, like, everything seems to be going okay at the moment, which is weird in its own right. I hope that it continues to, because if we could just not have to worry about North Korea being weird, that would be super. You know what? I think that's going to be it for that section. Just towards the back half of the episode now. So I'm gonna talk about Verne Troyer next.